Good morning. I'm just doing a quick systems check. Can you hear me, Todd or Charles?
Yes, sir. Most certainly I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, Todd, I can hear you.
Oh, hey, Charles.
Hey, man, how's it going?
It's going all right. We're doing
Good.
A-okay.
It's not going to just be you focus.
Well, we're hoping that's not the case. We have 19 people enrolled for it, so
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
I'll do uh I'll do a quick intro for you, Charles. Just make up a bunch of stuff, you know. But okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
quick intro on my end, and then I'll kick it over to you. And it'll be similar and the same as last time. You're gonna give the folks an opportunity to do a little hands-on work within the Python setup in Google, or as I recall.
Yep. Yep.
Cool.
Yep. I'm going to get them the directions and everything.
Charles, did you have time did you make it to Europe yet?
Yeah.
It starts in 3 minutes,
Yeah.
so
Oh, yeah. I
we
went
got
to,
chatter now. We'll talk later.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah. It was awesome.
I bet. Good.
Hello, everybody. How are you all doing? Looks like we've got some people coming on in.
Good morning, everyone. My name's John Byrne. I am a training consultant with Impact Professional Training. Gonna circle the airport for a little bit here to allow those who are planning on joining us to arrive,
Well-
and then we'll get started.
To be honest with you, I can't justify on the other side either, because she has many
Yeah.
other things that take away a lot of rights as well. If that makes sense.
Good morning, everyone. I'm John Byrne. I am a training consultant with Impact Professional Training, and I and the team are thrilled to welcome you to today's webinar, Unlocking the Power of Python. Before we dive in, I just have a few housekeeping items to cover. This webinar, it will be recorded, so behave ourselves. I think we're all pretty used to what that means. And we will provide a link to view this recording tomorrow for you. And also you can share with others who were not able to make it today. The chat will be available. We've turned off microphones. We certainly will be happy to turn them on when it's appropriate. We will have a Q&A discussion towards the end of today's webinar, so long as time avails. But in the meantime, feel free to put up any questions, contribute via chat. Charles will be doing a really kind of interactive walkthrough, an opportunity for you actually to be hands-on working with Python. So communicating through that, any questions, we're here to do so. Myself, I will be able to help Charles and my colleague Todd. For those who are interested in diving further into programming with Python, we are excited to be able to have Charles hosting and teaching the Introduction to Programming for Python. This course will be held December 2nd and 3rd, followed up by Advanced Programming with Python, which will be held December 4th through the 6th. These courses can be taken together, for individuals who want to move from point A all the way to point Z, so to speak. And they also can be attended in person here at our Knoxville Center, or you can attend and participate online from the comfort of your home or office. Something to keep in mind, we are appreciative of people who take the opportunity to spend and engage with us early. We're going to be offering a special discount to those who have attended today's webinar. It'll provide you the opportunity to buy one enrollment and receive a second enrollment at half off. That second enrollment can be for you, or it can be for any of your team members. The details will follow, but we hope this will help those who pick up what a little bit of taste of Python here with what we're doing the next hour, and I want to sit down for the full meal with us in a few weeks. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our guest presenter. He is a seasoned instructor and technologist whose passion for computers and teaching is only matched by his love of barbecue. Thank you for joining us, Charles.
Thank you too, man. I think that season came because of the gray hair. I think that's why he said that. So great morning, everyone. I trust that everyone is doing well and all is well. I'm going to share my desktop with you. There you go. We're doing it. We're making sure that it is being recorded, and it is. So awesome, awesome. you all should now be able to see my desktop, just a little short interaction piece, if you don't mind. You should be able to give me some responses here. And just like Zoom will do, they decided that they update their settings. So in the chat, if I ask you, are you with me? Just type yes for me. That'll be the most expedient thing to do, if you don't mind. So if everybody's with me, if you type yes, I'll be excited. Awesome, awesome, awesome. That means that everybody can hear me. All right, everybody, we're going to talk about unlocking the power, more certainly, of Python. And I am Charles B. Watkins Sr., and I'll be the fellow that's facilitating today. Here's just a little bit about me. I like computers. I usually tell people I've been doing this about 2 weeks, but the truth is it's been almost 30 years. So when I started doing it, I didn't have much gray hair. But I really, really like computers. And I tell folks I can't believe I get to do this for a living. So it's awesome. Our main focus today, for the time that we will be together, of course, will be Python. And my goal is to give you an introduction to just how awesome it is. I mean, the power of this is just absolutely phenomenal. So let's jump right in. Now, toward the end, I'm going to give you a way to access the environment. All right. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you what, if you'll just hold 1 second. Let's do this, if we will. Does everybody have a Google account? I'm pretty sure everybody's got a Google account. Who doesn't have one of those? Yeah. And so if you'll check the chat, everybody, I just put a link to a file, which is what we call a Jupyter Lab file. You can literally download that, copy it to your Google Drive. Now, if you're like me, I keep a dummy file that I work with, or a dummy Google account, that is, that I work with and play around. If you don't do that, that is definitely one of the things that I would suggest that you do.
My
Go ahead.
my company is blocked. So
Say that to me again. I apologize.
yeah, so my company is blocked. I cannot download it.
Oh, okay. Hold on 1 second. Let's see. Real quick, improvise, adapt, and overcome. Give me 1 second here, if you don't mind. Anybody else blocked?
Wonder if I should go on to my personal laptop.
So hold on 1 second for me, if you don't mind. Let's see if. Yeah, now definitely, if you can get to your personal laptop, that may be a way for you to get around it.
Oh,
1 second, we're going to be right on in.
Charles, I see, Chad Beck had a question about.
Yes, go ahead. I
Did you
apologize.
answer that for him
I did not. Do we?
in the chat? Yeah, it's what do we do with the file again?
Okay,
He
so
said,
when
what
you
did
when you get it,
verify?
everybody, what you want to do for those who have access to Google, you'll want to actually save that to your Google Drive. Once you save it to your Google Drive, you're just going to double click it, open it up, and it should open up in Colab.
And for those who aren't able to access Google Drive, that's, we've conducted this webinar several times, and I think if you, by all means, continue on with this, you'll be able to have you know, a walkthrough and the insights and kind of the what to do when you're able to do so from home. You should have received a copy of this presentation prior to the event. If not, you just will make sure, or if you don't have access or need anything from us on follow-up to be able to do so. So you'll be able to go hand in hand in your own time, back at either your home or when you're able to do so.
Yeah, you're most certainly. So if you will, just follow along with me for right now, if you will, and I will make sure that you have access to it. Colab, everybody, is an interface that allows you to do a lot of practicing without the necessity of actually installing. And so that is a big power piece of it. All right. Okay. So as we talk about what Python is what we call an interpreted programming language. If you're familiar with other languages, you have languages where you have to write the code, compile the code, then execute the code. But Python is so awesome that it's used by just about everybody. And what you see here on the screen shows you all of the companies that are actually using, or their entire interface is based off of Python, such as Netflix, Dropbox, Instagram, all of that. Now, where we really begin to see Python now taking the lead, if you might allow me to say that, is we really see it taking the lead as it relates to most things data. Now, that doesn't matter what you're talking about. If you're talking about analytics, it's taking the lead in analytics. If you're talking about AI, in many ways, it's taking the lead in AI. So in almost every genre that we find ourselves programmatically with data, we see, that Python is most certainly taking the lead on that. All right, that includes large language models as well. So just a quick history, created by Guido van Rossum from the Netherlands. It's been around for a pretty good while. He did it in an attempt to try to give people an easier understanding of how to work in programming, but without the complexities of what C provided. So when it came out, we had 2.x version. Now we're at the 3.x version. Now, this was released in 2008. So you can see, even at this point, we're talking about this thing being, almost 25 years old. So it is definitely a mature language. And it's one of those languages that sort of had a phoenix reemergence. It kind of went dormant a little while, and then all of a sudden it came back. And it came back for what I like to call the Zen of Python. Number one, you see some things where it says beautiful is better than ugly, meaning that if you can write it in a way where people can understand it, that's a whole lot better than it being complicated. Explicit is better than implicit. You don't have a lot of implicit things that happen in Python. Now, what that means is you don't have a lot of things happening automatically behind the scenes. Now, if any of you all have ever been involved in programming before, you will note that we have some what we call implicit operations. A lot of times you see that as it relates to whether or not we're going to be converting from one thing to another. And so in many times, you'll see that you'll have implicit conversion when it comes to converting, let's say, a text number into an actual number. Well, in Python, there is very, very little implicit conversion. Normally, you have to explicitly tell Python that you want to convert from one type to another. But what that does do is that makes sure that you're going to get what you want, when you want, how you want it. So from that particular standpoint, we can say simple is better. Complex is better though than complicated. And so we have a balance between the whole idea of simple and complicated. And then lastly, it makes sense if you can read it. Now, because of this, Python is a great language for anybody to get started with. Normally, languages that are easy for beginners to get started with, you can't use them past the beginner stage. Once you get to intermediate and advanced, the languages kind of fall off. Python is not that way. So I can take a sixth grader and get them started with Python, as well as a seasoned engineer and get them going with Python. That's how good it is. It is what we call an interpreted language. Now, that means it's easier to write. Now, what do we mean by easier to write? It's just a text file. That's it. By default, we tend to have an extension called .py. Do you have to have an extension called .py? The answer is absolutely not. You could call it barbecue if you wanted to, as long as you point the interpreter to it. So what you would do is, of course, go to python.org and install Python. Once you get Python installed, now you have what's called an interpreter on your machine. Now, it is possible for those who are wondering, well, what about applications that use Python? Even though I don't have Python installed on my machine, the application will come with all of the Python necessary binaries to execute Python. So you still have the interpreter one way or the other. Either you've installed it and it's available to everything on your machine, or it was a part of the solution that you downloaded. Once you have written a piece of code and stored it as a file, now behind the scenes, the interpreter is going to read it line by line. Now, what this does, though, it makes the code, as we say, very transportable. Now, what do I mean by that? Python will run on Windows. It'll run on Mac. It'll run on Linux. It'll run on Unix. As a matter of fact, of those four, the only one that it doesn't come pre-installed on is Windows. But on Linux, Mac OS, Unix, it comes pre-installed already. Now, you can upgrade it, of course. That means theoretically, notice I did say theoretically, you can write a piece of code and then run it on any of those platforms without having to do anything to the code. So in many ways, just the code itself is platform agnostic. Where you have to be sure that each one of those systems has the appropriate installation of the interpreter. So that's where the uniqueness comes in. But once you have the code, it will then read the code line by line, it being the Python interpreter. The difference between that and a regular compiler is, with a compiler, you have your source code. The source code is then compiled into an executable. You might end up with an exe or a DLL file, and then you execute it. Now, the good thing about that is it runs faster. Some would say it could potentially be more secure, but programmatically, it could be a bit more challenging to put together. I don't know if anybody's ever programmed in C or C# or C++ or something like that, or Assembler or Pascal. I'm probably showing my age there. But that's a little different. That coding can look a little more challenging. This is not as challenging to look at, and it lends itself to greater verbosity. I just like the way that sounds. So it can make it easier to read. All right, so now, why use it? Well, right now, it is still pretty much ranked number one in the world, really. You got three main features. It is productive, simple, and powerful. Shabam. You can extend it still using C or C++. And I say that because the default version of Python is based on C. Well, since it's based on C, if you are a C, C++ programmer, you can extend what Python can do with the C programming language. And it has a very active community. Now, what that means is just about anything that you can think of you would like to do, somebody has probably already done in Python. Now, let me say that again. Just about anything you could think of that you'd want to do, somebody has probably already done in Python. So if you will allow me to show you this, I'm going to go to python.org. This is python.org. This is where you would go to download what we would consider to be the default version of Python. Python has multiple iterations that are based on C. You got some that's based off of .NET. They call Iron Python, Java. But C is what we primarily use. And from here, this is where you could download it. As you can see right now, Python 13 is the latest. If you're using Colab, I think it's using Python 10 right now. But this can allow you then to choose whatever releases you want. And as you can see, as I scroll down here, we have a plethora of the releases all the way back to 2001. And the only reason in real life that you would use those is you've got some backwards compatibility you've got to be concerned with. Other than that, you tend to stay with the latest versions, but in your enterprise environment, you're going to have to be careful, especially for those systems that you've already put together and those solutions that you've already fashioned, because it's possible if you upgrade Python or you upgrade one of the extensions, it might break what you're doing. Now, with that in mind, everybody, one of the things I like to say is that Python is sort of like having a kitchen. And the reason I say a kitchen is the average kitchen comes outfitted with basic items. You've got a stove, you've got an oven, you may have a microwave, you've got some pots and pans and a few utensils. So that means you could do some cooking. Are you ready to be a gourmet chef? Probably not. You're probably going to have to extend that kitchen by adding some additional items. Python is the same way. It allows you to add these additional extensions to it. But because of that, it makes it super versatile. And so let's talk about the overall paradigm. This versatility, everybody, allows you to take if you have any programming experience at all. Now, it's not guaranteed, it's not required, but if you have any programming experience at all, you'll be able to apply it to Python. You will. It uses what we call an object-oriented environment. Object-oriented meaning that it has an object. Now, when we say an object, what we mean by that is, you can think of it this way. You can think of an object. Make sure we can see what I got. There we go. You can think of an object as we learned on in school, a person, place, or thing. Get back to my screen. There we go. You can think of an object as a person, place, or a thing. Well, in Python, each one of these objects has two things for sure. One of the things that it has is it has some properties. Properties describe what the object is. If the object is a file, a property might be location, it may be name, it may be extension, it may be create date, modify date. Those represent properties. But it's also possible that it will have some methods. Now, I tell people an easy way to think of this is to think of the property as though it is an adjective. It describes, not that I'm a great English major, but it describes the object. And if you think of the method, think of it like a verb. It helps us understand what it can do. So if we were talking about files, a method might be open. A method might be update or edit. A method might be close. A method might be delete. A method might be move. And as you can see, those kind of represent what we would do with the item. So whenever you see objects and properties like this, always equate them really kind of the same, but the properties help us define, and we also call them attributes of the object. All right, say yes if you're with me on that. Can you all hear me? I hope so. I've been talking a long time. Okay, good. I'd be happy to say it again, but yeah. All right. So now it is also representative of what we call structured programming, which means we have a way to control the flow. We have a way to do conditional programming, and we manage it in blocks. When you're working with Python, the thing that you have to remember is this: it is case sensitive, tab sensitive, space sensitive, and spell sensitive. The two things that'll trip you up most often will be case sensitivity and tab sensitivity, because tabbing allows you to define where your blocks begin and end. Those will be the things that kind of get in the way the most. And I don't care how long you've been doing it, those will be the two things that'll get in the way the most. Now, does it have any disadvantages? Well, some would say yes. Right now, it's not big on the mobile side of things. It is slower because it has to evaluate the code line by line. To know if something is wrong with it, you actually have to run it. Unlike a compiled program, many times during the compiling process, it can tell you if there are some errors there. But unless it's a syntax error, which means you just typed it wrong, Python doesn't know anything went wrong until you actually run it. When we say it's single threaded by nature, that means you only have one unit of execution as it relates to Python, the executable in your processor. However, people have extended that. They've added to the kitchen by creating packages that allow you to multi-thread what's happening with Python. All right, so how do we get started? As I said, you go out to python.org, and when you don't have anything else to do and you're looking for great fun, you just download it and install it. You can also use something called Anaconda. Now, some of you all may have heard of Anaconda, especially if you're in the data science realm of what Python offers. It is an environment that includes a Python install, but it also includes several of the additional extensions that you would use for data science. So it serves as what we call a framework that you can work within, and it allows you to manage Python. But it is a little big. In an enterprise environment, you'd have to have permissions to install it. Google Colab, which is what I propose that you play around with, it's free. All you got to do is have a Google account. And this is where I usually say having a junk Google account would work great. Oh, yeah. All right, so the latest version right now, that was 3.12, we're at 3.13. It's possible to have multiple versions of Python installed on your machine. And if we're trying to figure out what version of Python is, we actually type Python with a lowercase p and then v, and that checks to see what version of Python we have, or we can just execute it and run it in the interpreter. So let me show you what I mean here from an interpreter perspective. So if I type Python, oops. Let me get out of it. That's capital B. See there? There you go. I typed a lowercase b, and it's like, I don't know what to do with that, so I'll just start the interpreter. But Python lowercase v tells me, hey, this is the version that you're using. If I type Python, now I'm in the interpreter. So in the interpreter, I could start working. I could say 9 + 9 and then hit enter, and shabam. I'm programming all the way. But in real life, unless you're dealing with what we call ad hoc stuff, you are not going to do a lot of programming here in the interpreter, because there's no copy and paste that's easy. There's no IntelliSense that's easy. Only just hardcore folk try to program here in the interpreter. You could if you like. I'm not. I like to use those easy tools that allow us to do it. Now, the scripting environment for Python has something called the REPL. The REPL is really a way of thinking about how Python is working. So it reads your input, reads your file, it evaluates the input, then where necessary, it's going to print output to screen, and then it's going to repeat. So it reads, evaluates, prints, repeats, reads, evaluates, prints, repeats as it goes through the code. And as a part of going through that code, shabam, it then produces some output for you. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to look at Yon Colab. So did you say Yon? Yeah, I did say Yon. Yon Colab. This is the file that I gave you. Now, you will, listen closely, you will be able to use this in your own Google environment. All you have to do is download the file that I provided for you, save it to your G Drive, double click it, and shazam, it'll open up. All of this stuff is free. And the cool part about it is not only does it support Python. So here's Python now. Let me show you what I did here. And I'll do this so if you look, when you look at the recording, if you follow the red squiggly, you'll notice it says RAM and disk. And right here, there is an arrow that you should be able to see. I'm going to click this arrow, in which you'll notice there is a change runtime type. Now, again, as I said, I do this in the webinar, and I do the same thing in class because it makes looking at the recording so much simpler if you go back to review. We're going to then change the run type. And as you notice, I can either program in Python or R for those who are programming in R. Now, if you're going to try to play around with some of these higher GPUs to speed it up, you're going to have to pay for that. But for playing around, you don't need to pay for it. The other thing is, if you decide you wanted to add some modules to extend it, the thing you have to remember in this interface is not persistent. But I'm also going to give you a tip that you can save whatever you have done, almost like a snapshot, to your G Drive, and booyah, open it back up and pick up where you left off. It's like supercalifragilistic. Okay, when you're working in JupyterLab, everybody, this interface is called cells. So where I've already typed this out for you, you'll notice there's an exclamation point Python, uppercase V. Well, when you click inside of the cell, let me make sure you know where I'm talking about. You've got this arrow right here, which is one of the ways that you can execute that cell. The cool part about JupyterLab is it's meant primarily for data science. It allows you to create what we call Markdown language. Markdown language is very similar to where you see where I've got the power Python. If I edit it, let me show you where I got to edit. If I come over here and click that pencil and edit it, oh, this is Markdown. Markdown is a language within itself, and it allows you to create consistent formatting in a text document. Oh, it's awesome. Do you have to do it? No, but it sure does make things look cool. And when you're working inside of JupyterLab, Jupyter Notebook, whatever code you execute, so I'm going to click this arrow right here. When it runs, booyah, I see not only the code, but I also see the result. So I get the Markdown, which represents my descriptions, comments, information. I get the code, and I can have the result. And I can save that all to the IPYNB, which is IPython Notebook. That's what that means. And so if you want Colab to execute what we call a command line, as though you're executing from the terminal on the machine, you proceed it with an exclamation point. That's what that exclamation point is. But if you'll notice here, if I come down, if we were to do this and come down to where it says print, and if I click, well, booyah, look at there. It prints the most popular program in the world. Hello, world. Oh, yes. Now, there are a lot of environments. We call these integrated development environments. So I just showed you Colab. One of the others that you saw me use the regular command line. You also have, now I like this one. You're going to pick what you like. This is Visual Studio Code. So Visual Studio Code which is a free script editor from Microsoft you can use. And lastly, but not leastly, you can use PyCharm. Now, are there other things? Yes, there are other things that you could use as well. But PyCharm has two versions. And what I mean by versions is there's a community version and there's a free version when it's starting to come up. And I'll show it to you. But it is strictly meant for Python, although it'll do Python, it'll do R, it'll do just about any kind of text-based scripting environment. But it's a very cool way to manage your overall Python environment. And so that just represents the different environments. There's a built-in scripting environment called the IDLE, Integrated Development Learning Environment. You can choose to install that. Gives you some IntelliSense and stuff. However, it's easy to use. It's already there. You just install it during the initial install, or you can go back and install it using the Python install files. And from there, you just choose IDLE. Comes up to this screen, but it gives you two windows, and that can sometimes be challenging. So you got a window to write the script in, and you have a window to run it in. So I hardly ever do it. The only time I'd ever use IDLE is if I didn't have any other choice. It's better than just a regular straight command line. All right, say yes with that if you with me. Awesome. And so here we talked about the different environments. So Anaconda, PyCharm. We've got another IDE called Spyder, JupyterLab that I just showed you here that we're going to be using, Visual Studio Code, and Google Colab. So these are just some environments. All right. This is how we got our link. Now I just want to make sure this is on the screen so that you can see it as part of the recording. That way, if you need to go back and take a look at it, you can go back and take a look at it. And this will be the link that you will use. Be sure to download it because I didn't allow anybody to make any changes to the file. So just download it. Once you download it, store it on your instance of Google Drive, and boom shakalaka, it's yours to use. So let's go over now and have some fun with it. Now, I get excited about this stuff. Some people laugh at me, but I really do. Okay, now I've actually given you more than we're going to do just because I got excited when I wrote it up. So no, even after we get through with this, you're going to have a bit more. But you can get some help. We've got something called PyDoc. PyDoc allows you to get help. You can get help based on a module name, based on a keyword, based on a method, based on the class. Any of those things you can get help on. And you'll note, everybody, that I put the exclamation point in front of it because it's actually a command line item. And so when I do Python m PyDoc print, what this will do is it will use the Python executable to execute PyDoc to give me a help environment about print. Now, let me ask you this question. Where do you think you're going to get most of your help information from? Can anybody tell me? Where do you think you're going to get this? This is your opportunity to do classroom participation. Where do you think you're going to get most of your help information from? The web. Heather, yes. Yes. Has anybody heard of this thing called ChatGPT? Anybody heard of that? Yeah, I'm hoping so. Yeah. Yeah. Google. Yeah. Yeah. Is there anyone who, okay, do this. If you've not used ChatGPT before, put no in the chat. If you haven't used it, put no in the chat. I've never touched it. I've never used it. So I'm assuming that everybody has. In my humble but also accurate opinion, if you're in programming and you're not using it, you're making a great mistake. Now, some folks say, but you're cheating. Well, people said you were cheating with Google too. But ChatGPT and those things that are like it, it's like Google on steroids. But you still have to know how to code. You still have to know how to interpret what it's saying. You still have to know how to fix it because it's only going to be right about 90% of the times. And sometimes it'll feel like 80% of the times. You still have to know how to apply it. You still have to know how to assess its success. You still have to know how to do all that stuff. But it just makes life a whole lot easier. Trust me, what it would take you 5 hours to do, you'll be able to do sometimes in 30 minutes. But that doesn't mean you don't have to know how to do it. All right, say yes to that if you're with me. Just keep that in mind. Okay, another way to get help though, let's say you're not connected to the internet. And it's possible maybe you're doing this all on your machine, you're on the plane, you're not connected. Well, if we put a question mark in front of anything we want information with and execute it, you know what'll happen? It'll give us help. Now, it kicks it over, just so you'll know. When we do this, it kicks it over here, but I get a help document. It's a nice way to get some help. Still trying to come up. Or you could pass the function, the method, the variable to the help function. And notice I got the same thing. You just put it in a different place. The help function just put it down here in one of the cells, whereas the question mark put it over here. But in any event, it's something that you'll do to get some help. Yeah. All right. Now, some of the basic syntax. As I told you, you got to be careful about your case, but then indentation. You got to make sure things are indented correctly. Excuse me, especially when we have these, what we call block objects. So if we're talking about an if statement or a for statement, by default, we define it using what we call a block. And we're going to see here in a second. But you got your comments start with a pound sign. You don't really have block comments in Python, but the way you get around that is what we call using a doc string. And the doc string, if you'll look at my screen here, the doc string will start with either 3 single quotes and then end with 3 single quotes, or 3 double quotes and end with 3 double quotes. Then everything in between those quotes is in essence just a string. You can use it as part of your documentation. You can use it as part of your remarks. If you're just creating a regular remark, then you proceeded with a pound sign, which the lady said I had to call it a hash. So in this particular instance, I say, hey, this is the inline comment. This is a doc string. I really love barbecue because it's wonderful, of course. And I did some importing of a method, and then I printed it out. So if we execute this, you'll note it says, oh, I'm in the contents folder in essence. That's what that gave me. Now, let's talk about this whole idea of objects. There are different types of objects, and these things are actually called types. I gave you this visual so that it will be a bit easier for you to kind of grasp what's happening. You have basic types. You have numbers. Sequence represent a list. Now I use the word list loosely there, but represent a sequence or an array of items. You got different set types. We have mappings, which are dictionaries. We have things that we can call, and we have modules. So when you look at this, it gives us that feel for the hierarchy of types within Python. Is it a number? If it's a number, is it an integer, integral? Is it real? Is it complex? If it's a sequence, if it's a container or data container. Immutable means it can't be changed once it's created. If you wanted to change, you'd have to recreate it. So is it a string, a tuple, a byte? If it's mutable, that means it can be changed. It's a list or it's a byte of arrays. We have different types. We have a set, which is yet another mutable piece, but frozen sets are immutable. We use sets a lot of times when we want to make sure we get rid of all the duplicates. And then mappings, which we call dictionaries. Other people will call them key value pairs, dictionary, hash tables, associative arrays. So it's just another way of maintaining information. But I gave you that. It'll give you an easy way to move down through it. All right, so if you'll look here, I said, hey, what type is barbecue? Well, type is an example of a function that will tell you the data type of the thing that you pass to it. Well, we're passing a string, and it says str. Well, go figure. That's exactly what it is. If I were to type here, and you can too if you like, if I were to type and put the number 58 in there, because that's how old I am, and then if I ran this again, you would note, oh, int. You may say, well, wait a minute. Earlier it said string. Here's what you have to remember in this interface, everybody. If you don't explicitly say print, then it will only print the output of the last statement. Let me say that again. If you don't explicitly say print, it will only print the last statement or the last item of the last statement. Notice we explicitly said print. I added print here to barbecue, and then it by default printed out the last statement. So you see class string, then int. All right, give me a yes on that if you're with me. That can be a little important. Okay, remember that I said that everything in Python is an object, right? It has properties, it has methods. When you're trying to see what those are, you can use a function called dir. Dir is a great function for that, so that you can see what the methods and properties are that are associated with an item. So this is a number when I do dir. Now, notice, everybody, you got a lot of things with what we call dunders. What the heck is a dunder, Charles? Anything that has this double underscore, it's actually a double underscore. They call it dunder. So right now, since you're kind of just getting started, some of you don't worry about that. But if we look down here, what we'll see is here are our other methods. We can see if it's an integer, we can count the bit, we can get the denominator, we can see if it's a numerator, if it's real, and we can do all of that because we're looking at an integer. Now, you don't have to move. Let me show you this. I'm going to change that to the best thing, what I call the FOTG, which is the food of the gods, which is barbecue. And when I look at it now for barbecue, notice, didn't have as many dunders. As I said, that's not the thing I'm most concerned about. But what I am interested in is, jumping Jehoshaphat's. Look at all of those methods. We can get the centerfold, find, format, index. And so shabam, you're like, okay. So how could that help me? Well, with any of these, if I needed to, I could say, well, dot capitalize. What will capitalize do? Well, here's what capitalize. That's all I have is dunders on it. Okay, so if that's all I have on it is dunders, then I don't see any method that I can use, because if it were a method, it wouldn't have the double underscore by default. There's a way to use them, but right now we're not concerned about it. So one of the things we could do is we could say, well, give me some help on that if you don't mind, sir. So I'm getting help on the object and one of the methods associated with the object. And so now it says capitalize. Look at that. Return a capitalized version of the string. More specifically, make the first character have uppercase and the rest lowercase. Well, there you go. And so you can see how simple it is for us to begin to get some help outside of going and searching the web for it, of course. Now, in Python, we have these things called variables, and variables allow us to store information. As it says, a variable is a name or identifier used to store data in memory. And it allows us to then kind of store it now, use it later. I was in Costco and I actually saw some Tupperware. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but I do. And so we've got a variable that we're going to define called name. Now, to assign something to the variable, we use an equal sign. And we're going to assign this string. I know it's a string because it has single quotes around it. If it had double quotes, it would still be a string. You could use single quotes or double quotes. It doesn't matter as long as you're consistent. What you start with, the end with. So name is a string. Age is a number. How? I don't see any quotes around it. And then I'm going to print my name is, which is a string. And then I'm going to reference the variable. And then I'm going to say I am. I'm going to reference the variable years old. Now, this print statement, everybody, now has 1, 2, 3, 4 parameters. A print statement is very flexible. You can have as many parameters as you want. Everything that is a parameter and that is separated by a comma, that means you'll have a space between those items. So let's execute this. Now you can change it or you can leave it at barbecue 58 if you want to. And you'll notice it says my name is barbecue. I am 58 years old. And that's the absolute truth. Now give me a yes if you're good with that. So it's kind of simple, but this allows us to create code that is definitely reusable. If we're going to assign it, let's say pi 3.14, that represents a numeric value. If we're going to create what we call a data structure, this creates a list. Now you may ask, how do I know? Because list will have square brackets. A tuple will either have parens or no brackets at all. So now I've assigned a single value to the variable. Pi is now a single valued variable, whereas FOTG, which means food of the gods, holds an array or sequence of values. And now we're going to print this out. So we're going to print type pi, And then we're going to print type FOTG so we can see what type those items are. And when we do that, it says pi is of type class float because it's a decimal, so it's a float. FOTG is of type class list, which means it represents a list of items. Now, what I'm going to show you is I'm going to print the FOTG. Ooh, look at that. That's called IntelliSense. That's like magic on a stick. And now if we execute it, aha, it prints out barbecue ribs slaw and yon beans. Oh, yes. And this allows us then, everybody, to figure out what the operators are. So we use the equal sign, that's assignment. Add is adding, just like we think. Minus is subtracting. The multiplication is to multiply. The / is to divide. The percent means mod, which really means to return the remainder. Exponents take something up exponentially. 2 / gives us the floor. What that means is, in essence, it's just going to return the integer part of a real or decimal. That's all it does. Now, what I did here, everybody, you can go back and look. I showed you all those items. What addition looks like, what a subtraction looks like, what multiplication, division, mod looks like. Notice that A is 10, B is 20. And so when I B mod A, the remainder is 0, right? Because 20 divided by 10 is 2 with no remainder. Remainder being 0, it is 0. We take it to the next exponent and we get the floor of 333 divided by 20. So I get 16, which means it chopped off everything after the decimal point and just gave me the integer. All right, give me a yes on that if you will. And the next thing I'm going to look at here is comparison operators. Comparison operators allow you to do that. It allows you to compare stuff. Less than, greater than, less than or greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. The one that throws people sometimes is this one, because that's comparison. In Python, a single equal sign means to assign, as you saw us do earlier, but to compare, to see if something is actually equal to a value, you use 2 equals together, which means Python is very explicit in how it works. And so as we said, now we know exactly what it means. Well, not equals is the exclamation point equals, or you can use the term not, which takes whatever is true and makes it false. Oh, yeah. Now, the basic control logic, everybody, we have just the basic if then else statement. The challenging thing, though, with the if then else statement, and you'll see right here, is that it is created as a block. Now, watch closely. If x is greater than 5, how do I know it's a block? Because it has the colon. And the thing that had to happen on the next line was we had to then tab it over by 4, and that's the default. If you did not tab it over, you would get an error. Even though Python really only requires you to tab it over 1. But most interfaces default to 4 spaces for a tab. And if you don't space over 4, the interface will actually cause an error, not so much in Python. All right, give me a yes with that if you're with me. So just remember that kind of catches folk. So I'm going to execute this, and it says, hey, x is greater than 5 because x is 30. Oh, I said print line 4. Well, x is greater than 5. Since that's true, it did the true part. Well, suppose we make x 3, and when we execute it now, it just says line 4. You're like, what happened? What happened to print x is greater than? What we didn't do, we didn't give it the opportunity to make a decision if the condition was false. So if we come on down a little ways, now we're saying if x is greater than 5, print x is greater than 5. Else, if it's not, which means if it's false, we're going to print x is not greater than 5. Now else is a part of the block, but it doesn't feel like it because I tell people it looks like it's a sibling, doesn't it? But it's actually a part of the block. And I know it's a block because what? It has colons right there. Oh, yes. So that represents our ability, everybody, to work with conditional items. One of the other things that we have is what we call a loop. A loop allows us to iterate normally through a collection of items. Well, what is a collection? That's one of our data structures. And this data structure that we're looking at here represents a list. And I know that because of the square brackets. Well, suppose I want to go through that list, and I don't necessarily know how many items are in the list, but I want to go through every item in the list and just print it off. Well, this is where we can use a for statement. But notice again, so for fruit in fruits, fruits is our collection, and fruit is really just a made-up variable to hold each one of the items that we pick out of the collection, or what I like to call the bowl, one at a time. And so every time we go through each item in this collection, we're going to then execute this print statement. And now you'll notice we print fun fruit, apple, banana, cherry, grape, berry, and peach. Now I'm going to let you go back and look at that while loop and stuff just a little bit later. What I gave you here, everybody, is what I like to call the basic data structures. So you can see what the data structures are: arrays, sets, dictionaries, tuples. You see how they interrelate. You can have lists. A list is mutable. A list can have methods. These are the methods that it can have, but it's mutable. It can change. We can have different elements, and we can see the elements could be an integer, a string, or a list. We can have different indexes. Indexes allow us to access items in those collections. So I just put that there for you as a tree, and that can help you with your understanding of how these data structures are going to work as well. One last thing before I kind of give you we got just a few minutes left, and we'll do a little question and answer. And I got a little piece I'm gonna go through with you. But you're going to extend Python, and that's going to really be important because, as I said, even though it comes with a basic kitchen, it doesn't have everything. It does come with a set of packages that you can use to extend it. You just have to import them. And so here, if we want to do some factorial math, we actually have to import the math package. That package then has either functions and or classes that we can use. And if we look here, what this tells me is that math, which is the package that we've imported, has a method called square. How do I know it's a method? Because it uses what we call dot notation. The other reason I know it's a method is because it's got parens at the end. So it's got a square method, it's got a factorial method, and it's got a pi. So math.pi, if you don't see a paren at the end, that normally means it's more of a property type of item. Well, if we execute this, this allows us to calculate factorials and square roots. I'm pretty sure you always want to do that all the time because it's exciting. One of the other ways that we can do importing, everybody, a package can have multiple items that you can import. So date time has multiple classes or functions that you can import. You could say import date time, which would import everything, and then you'd have to do exactly like we did up here with math. In essence, it pointed to math, and then we told it what we wanted out of the math package. So once we pointed to it, we say we want math dot whatever that particular method is. Well, in this particular instance, here's what we did. Instead of bringing everything in from date time, we decided that from date time, we only want to import one function, and that function was date time. And because of that, we didn't have to say date time dot now. So it gives you a shorter way to write it. And so that's how we can now import whatever's needed. Now you can download all of that stuff from online if you like. All right, so what you're going to see, everybody, I gave you a whole bunch of stuff, but one of the things I want you to think about, we got like a little project here that you can work your way through. And in your leisure, your question that you'll be answering is, hey, I'm a number between 1 and 10. I am even and greater than 5. What am I? So your task is to write a Python code to find and print the answer to the riddle. You should print the number that satisfies the riddle condition. Use an if statement to check the condition and print the answer. Write your code below this comment. Now, I kind of cheated for you and showed it to you. But if you will, you'll be able to try that on your leisure. So even though we're almost about 1 minute in, does anybody have any questions?
Yes, I had a question.
Let's go ahead.
The if statement, I didn't see a then there. Is that implied?
It is implied. Great. That's a great catch. So with Python, there is no then. It's just implied. So it's if, else, else, if, but there's no then. Great question. Anybody else? Y'all mighty quiet. Are y'all excited? I'm telling you, the stuff that you can do with Python is just absolute. When I say absolutely amazing, it is absolutely amazing, the stuff that you can do. So depending on what you do at work, I can almost guarantee you that real quick, if you'll just allow me. As you can see, there is an entire community here that can allow you to just about access anything you can think of. And so if I go to PY, this is py.pi. This is the Python package index. You can search for any package you want. And just for fun, I'm going to search for barbecue, because surely somebody has created an extension for barbecue, and they have. Oh, that's just so awesome. So if you can imagine it, probably somebody has already created an extension to help you in your kitchen. All you got to do is access it. And once you access it, there should be normally some help information that'll tell you how to use that particular package within your environment. Well, all right, everybody. That's what I got.
Fantastic job,
Great work.
Charles. We really greatly appreciate your guys. What do you, I guess some of the folks who attended today, I hope each and every one of you picked up a few, at least more, maybe more than you can kind of digest or put to work here in an hour. But thank you very much, Charles. You always do a great job.
Awesome. And you all will get a copy of the slide deck that I used as well. And so you'll be able to get the slide, and you'll be able to get that IPython file if you download it.
And Charles, I don't know if you could link over, but for those who have a minute or two or a little bit of time to extend, if you click over to the Impact professional training site, we land on the page for the Python courses that we offer, and also the two that are coming up in December. Is anyone here already registered for the course, or does anyone have any questions I can answer for you right now? Enrollments, we can take credit cards, we can bill invoice, to your company. The promotion extends until the 15th of the month, which will give you enough time to maybe rouse up a few others. But the promotion on, okay, great. If you go to Python there, you type that in the search bar, great. And we have introduction to programming with Python. That's December 2nd. You won't be able to use your or get the discount for the second class at half off through the site, folks. You would have to do something directly, contact us directly for that to be taken care of for you. Okay. And I think for some, I've had folks who attend just the first 2 days, or maybe follow through the entire week. Charles, could you talk a little bit about what happens in these courses? What you would kind of where you start so far as what they expect to cover the first 2 days. If someone kind of comes in at a certain level, would it be a good idea for them to stick, and join us for the entire 5? And I've had people do, participate in 2. I've had people come just to the advanced part. Maybe you can have, there's some folks who may have some questions there that you could help out with.
Now, my suggestion, everybody, and I'm not, trust me, I'm not a salesman. The best sales job I ever did was my wife of 35 years. And after that, But I do normally recommend that people do the intro and the advanced, unless you've really been working with this for a while. There are going to be some things that are going to be covered that are going to definitely make that advanced class easier. But in this beginning class, in essence, I gave you kind of an encapsulated beginning class in 1 hour. This is normally 14 hours that we will be going through, inclusive of labs. And I would literally be walking you through the labs to make sure that you have these foundational concepts under your belt. And then after we have gone through the beginning, which again is setting it up, processing data types, data structures, conditional statements, reuse of code. We didn't get a chance to do that, of course. That's where you're going to be building functions to make it more functional for you. Writing code to process files and directories, because we almost always have to get something off of our system and we need to either manage it, manipulate it, or create it. And then how are we going to deal with exceptions and errors? So again, we didn't get to talk about that either. But we'll be able to go in depth in all of these items. You would have a virtual environment that you'd have 6 months access to, excuse me, and you would have, of course, a full-fledged piece of documentation there. I think it's a couple hundred pages that we'd have for beginning. Then the next thing that we would have would be for the advanced. Let's see.
We've had a couple questions come out here. One is backing up to Alfonso. That's we do list other Python courses here, and this by no means are the only 2 areas of learning people can take on. He's asked Charles whether for the data science or a data wrangling course, what would be the prerequisites? Now, generally speaking, there are courses listed there. Could you help with that, or are these 2 courses ideal? Someone, I guess it depends on how much.
That depends on your level of expertise as it relates to how much exposure you've had to working with data. And if you want to do the data wrangling or the data science and you have had the beginning or advanced, it could be a little challenging because I make an assumption you know how to do all of that. And we don't really have a lot of time to review. Now, like I said, I've been doing this 30 years. So if I get the feeling that somebody's having a challenge, I'm going to do my best to make sure that you're going to feel good. And again, you're going to be foundationally sound, even if that means I have to skip a lunch or something and spend time with you. I'll do that. But it can make it challenging when you hit that data science and data wrangling, because both of those assume that you understand all these concepts that we would have gone over in beginning and advanced. Because once we get to advanced, this is where we start talking about really working with object-oriented items. We start talking about, we create applications, we create a web-based application, we create a REST-based application, we do just a little bit of data science in there. We talk about how we would do unit testing so that you can make sure that automatically you build in a certain level of testing to make sure that your code is consistently functioning throughout its lifespan. We talk about how to package the whole thing. So that kind of thing happens in the advanced. And then when you get to, if you don't mind, let me back up. The one, if I had to make a suggestion, I would say data wrangling would be first. Data wrangling, in essence, shows you how to use Python for extraction, transformation, and load. It's straight ETL. Well, with this, you learn how to, again, deal with data frames. We're going to talk about NumPy, pandas. We're going to talk about Matplotlib. Matplotlib allows you to deal with graphing. So you're going to learn how to graph items in different ways. We're going to talk about web scraping. Then we're going to talk about connection to relational database management systems, which we call RDMS. So when you connect to relational database management systems, you may be connecting to SQL. You may be connecting to Oracle. You may be connecting to Postgres. You may be connecting to some web-based interface. So we're going to talk about doing that. And as we say, application in real life, and the conclusion, we try to apply that. We got a lab that allows you to apply what we've been talking about so that you can actually have yet another hands-on activity of working with it. That is the data wrangling. And then you would come to our data science.
It was the second one, I think. Oh, that's a different one. Data wrangling. There it is. Python for data science.
And so this
Fine.
talks about how we're going to use it, how we're going to use TensorFlow. We're going to be talking about scikit-learn, and literally how you will then use the stuff you learned in data wrangling, which means that you'll be learning how to use data frames. You'll be using those data frames that you learned about in data wrangling. You'll be using NumPy that you learned about in data wrangling, but you would have also began the covering that in advanced. And so in my opinion, that there is a flow to this, introduction, advanced, data wrangling, then data science. That's my opinion. You're going to have to you're going to have to ascertain where you are, potential on your skill level. But I always tell people, if you follow that potential workflow, it seems to work a little better. But again, like I said, everybody has to make their own call. Any more questions on that?
Well, just a heads up on those two. We don't currently have those scheduled. If you'd like to, request us to schedule it, please send either myself or John something stating that you are looking and are interested in that class. Currently, we just have the intro class going, as well as the advanced programming techniques.
Is everybody good? Awesome. Well, look, I have had the time of my life. I love doing this. Just the opportunity to do it is exciting for me. So I want to thank John and Tom for offering me the opportunity to do it as well. And thank you all for allowing me to do it as well.
Look forward to seeing you here in a couple weeks.
I'll be there,
2
man.
weeks.
Getting close to Christmas. Todd, my pleasure. My pleasure.
Always a pleasure, sir.
All
All right. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
All right, everybody. And in the words of the great poet, peace, love, and soul. Until next time. Don't do
Bye,
it.
everybody.
All right. See ya.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Just quick, John Todd, I did make sure that it was recorded as well.
It's still recording, so you can kill that too, or if I don't know if you just log off, it
Yeah.
stops, but.